before I talk about like public diplomacy, particularly, what I want to say is how I got to public diplomacy, right? Because I mean, I was and I still consider myself a student of international relations. And then right after my master's from Jahangirnagar, I took a job at the Canadian High Commission in Bangladesh. I was working for the embassy mainly as an assistant to the High Commissioner, but I was also handling a lot of like media relations. So in that time, I saw very closely how media and politics is really interconnected. And at that time, I mean, we all know, like being student of international relations, we know how traditional diplomacy works, right? And I'm sure you are familiar with like the track one diplomacy and track two diplomacy, those kind of things. So uh, during my like work at the embassy, I saw that it's becoming more and more important to not just talk to the government, not just talk to the interest group or different stakeholders, but also directly talk to the people of a country. So that's the part of like diplomacy that's called like the or considered as like public diplomacy. So when a government of a country is directly talking to citizen of another country, it can be in group or it can be in individual, regardless. It's the government to individual connection that defines like public diplomacy. So I was like really interested in that, and then I wanted to look at graduate school. I had like different choices that I wanted to go for, but like when I applied and other stuffs, what I saw in terms of like the scholarship options, I had the best scholarship offer from here. So I mean, I took the decision to come here instead of going to England, which was my original plan that I'll go and study in England. But I mean, brought me here. And I started mainly studying, like I started with this idea. What I wanted to learn is the how media impact politics in general, especially international politics. That was my goal. And then I got interested in how media particularly interacts with diplomacy. And then later on focused on particularly primary public diplomacy and media, because that's where like most of, I would say the media component comes in. So talking about like public diplomacy, I need to clarify some things before I do that. So as a scholar, I think myself like I feel I belong to the post-positivist school of thought. So if you have, I'm sure you're familiar with this different school. The reason is that, I mean, I do believe in the positivist school, but the thing is, I think the social science that we study, we cannot like be in like fully take the positivist method and use that to answer all the questions that comes to us, or even attempt to answer those questions. So you need a combinations of like positivism and some modern post-positivist theory. So I think that's where I kind of position myself. I also kind of see myself as a like a multidisciplinary and mixed method researcher. So, I mean, I was a student, I still am, and I wanted to look it from the media perspective. That's why I transferred to a media school, because I thought I knew higher enough. Definitely, there's never enough, but I think I knew IR better than I understand the media portion. And the puzzle that I was trying to solve has two components, right? I need to understand how media works. I need to understand how international relations work. So I had some knowledge having a bachelor and master's from JU I I had my foundations in international relations, so I wanted to go to a media school so that I understand how media portion works, so that I can combine these two, bring these two disciplines together. So that's how, I mean, I got to the point where I am. Uh, Initially, I started my research with place branding and nation branding. So for my, like when I did my master's thesis here, what I was looking at, I'm sure you will be familiar with this, the Beautiful Bangladesh campaign. So I used that in an experiment that was, I used some clips from that Beautiful Bangladesh campaign commercial. Uh, those commercials that was broadcast in televisions and other platforms. Uh, and I had people from about 40 different countries covering all the continents in the world. And I basically wanted to see, is tourism advertising, can you use tourism advertising or some sort of like positive stimuli to change a perception of people about a country? So, I mean, normally when we think about like Bangladesh, think about like foreigners' perspective. How do you think? I mean, and this is my question to you. How do you think most of the people from any other countries think of Bangladesh? Like, what's our trademark? Ready-made garments, lot of natural disaster, some political instability, mostly negative stuff, right? I mean, that's what get in the media. There are definitely a lot of positive things happening, but media being media always tend to focus on negative things more than positive things. And that has always been uh, a struggle that I live with, but that's how media works. And we'll have to deal with that in a way. So that like brings me to the point that how you can uh, like use this kind of tools that already exist, this kind of campaigns, to kind of improve the country image for any given country, especially for third world countries or developing countries like Bangladesh. Mainly because we do not have a lot of resource to spend for diplomacy effort, right? So think about UK or USA or France. They have those cultural centers. I mean, we have all three in Bangladesh. There's the British Council, there's the earliest process, there's the American Center. What are they basically doing? They are exporting their culture. They are branding themselves, right? And then there are many other soft powers too. But countries like Bangladesh, we do not have enough resource to open a Bangladesh. We have only enough resource to open embassies, but not like cultural centers that we can teach other country about ourselves and show them who we truly are. So that led me to these questions. Can we use something that we already have and use that to improve like our country image? So I did an experiment with that, and the result was yes. I am summarizing. I'm not going into the details, but I had a very large sample of about 700 people from 40 different countries across all over the world, and most of the people, I mean, their attitude improved after seeing those like messaging that was taken from the Beautiful Bangladesh campaign about the Bangladeshi culture, about the Bangladeshi people, and about. So I had four hypotheses that it will things will improve in terms of culture, in terms of people, in terms of the country as a whole, and then positive um, uh, what do you call it, a positive attitude towards the government, which did not happen. And that makes sense. I mean, I later found out why it did not, because, I mean, people don't trust government in general, especially foreign government. No one wants to trust foreign government as well. But on the other scale, it was like really working. So that's what kind of got me started into like understanding like the public diplomacy, how we can use this kind of different tools, especially media tools, to encourage people from many different countries, not encourage, basically improve their attitude towards Bangladesh or their knowledge about the country or any other given country in that result, right? So let's talk more about like public diplomacy in general. Right? So in public diplomacy, there's, as I was saying, that public diplomacy is the aspect of diplomacy. It's a part of the track to diplomacy in a way that where a government directly communicates with citizen of other country, right? So there are many literature that suggest how public diplomacy can be done and how it is done. One of the most like prominent researcher and scholar in this field is Nicholas Kull. I will send you some material link on the chat when I'm done with that. So Kull in 2009 proposed a taxonomy of public diplomacy. Are any of you familiar with Nicholas Kull's work or his work in public diplomacy? Okay. So in that, he basically distinguished that how you can do, there are 5 ways that you can do public diplomacy. So the first one he said is the most common is the advocacy. So what happens basically in advocacy is that a government talks to other countries, people, and try to persuade them or in a way pursue them or get their favor in terms of their policy. So let's say, for example, what is a recent example? If we think about Bangladesh, I'm sure you're all, you all know about this, that recently Bangladesh has changed its policy towards towards Israel a little bit, right? That now Bangladeshi passport, like newer Bangladeshi passport holder can travel to Israel, whereas previously that was banned, that you could not travel to Israel. And that, I'm sure as a student of international relations, you understand that did not happen in a single day. It was a huge effort from the Israel side, not just towards Bangladesh, many other countries, many other mainly Muslim countries, to advocate on their behalf to change their policy, right? So that's like one of the component, like the advocacy component of public diplomacy. And you can use that to directly talk to people, talk to like different stakeholders like business owners and others, people who might actually benefit from this, or someone like tourists who actually want to go and see those religiously important places that are actually in Israel. That's also that's not just important for religiously for any one of the religion, but all 4 major religion in the world. So people would definitely be interested in going there. So those kind of people, and when they get to the decision making part, those advocacy starts functioning, right? So that's like one of the part. There's so I said 5, right? And I just talked about advocacy. And I don't have a slide or anything ready. I'm just going off of my head. So if I forget about one, I'll come back to that later on. So the second one, not definitely in this order, but there's another one that's about culture. So that's about like showcasing your culture to other countries, where you can basically say how unique culture that you have. It's both talking about cultural similarities and dissimilarities. So what is unique about you and what do you have in common? But what happens is that when uh, you can attract the people with either of these, right? The reason I say that is you can attract people with a similar um, cultural similarities, that yes, we are the same. And when it's not the same, you can attract people by uh, what do you call it, uh, because of the uniqueness that you bring in. So there's always that option. So mm, okay, so you can use that culture. One of the prime example for that will be think about football, sports. It's a culture, right? uh, Whenever there's this football World Cup, you will see, I mean, in Bangladesh, how crazy we are about football. There's always flags all over for all the like major countries, right? We do like them a lot because of their culture, that one aspect of their culture, right? So that is like the cultural export. If you think about other parts of culture, one really good examples will be things like Hollywood or Bollywood. People, I mean, Hollywood has dominated this for many, many years now, just because Hollywood movie is famous all over the world. But Bollywood, like our neighbor, has done a really good job at that too. Like they have, at least in the Asian countries and to some extent in the Western countries, they are slowly making a space for them, that there is like a Bollywood culture. In popular streaming platforms like Netflix and Hulu and other stuffs, you will see that a lot of like Bollywood uh, film series and other stuffs are there. So there's this cultural export happening, right? And then there's exchange, which happens like when basically the exchange can happen in two ways. It's either people traveling from, like when people travel from one country to another and share their uh, culture, their norms and values and other stuffs with each other, and getting to know each other. Just this experience of exchanging, understanding other people as uh, human being as we are, so that it does not like seem foreign. So that's like another aspect of uh, the public diplomacy. One of the very common examples of that will be, you're familiar with this kind of like exchange programs that different country offers, or like a semester abroad program that different country offers, or just a cultural exchange program that is there. And there's also, you will see, and this one kind of crosses the boundary between uh, exchange and culture, is that international trade fair or international different kind of festival, this kind of fair or exhibition, different countries will open stalls and showcase about them. So it's both about culture and exchange. So those are like some ways that you can deal with public diplomacy. The fourth one is the fourth. This is actually the last one in terms of CUL's list, is called international broadcasting. So international broadcasting is when basically you are sending out or broadcasting information about not just you, but other things too, in general, uh, to worldwide, like people anywhere. And what you get in return is that you receive, you get a reputation of being a credible source. People can trust you. So, for example, think about BBC, right? Where is it from? UK. It's funded by public money, right? But they are one of the really um, very credible sources of information, like worldwide news information. So when people see some information there, people get influenced by that. People take that seriously. And when they write something about their country or any other country, be it in favor of or opposing, it's going to have an effect on people. So there's this international broadcasting aspect in there, right? And the fifth one that I forgot initially, this is, according to Nicholas Gull, is one of the most important part of public diplomacy, and it's called listening. So why is listening important? Is that the way Carl defines listening is that you will have to understand, or you will have to listen to other countries and other countries' people's opinion and find out what is their perception about you, about your country, right? And then, only then, you can start working to change it. If you don't listen what other countries are thinking about you or saying about you, you are not able to take an appropriate action. You might think this is what I want to sell, the brand, but your brand might, people might perceive you as a like a totally different uh, mm, yeah, have a totally different perception of you than what you have. So listening comes like very important. Now let me get to uh, the how does that fit in into the digital aspect, like where does the digital like portion fit in. So if we think about digital diplomacy, when we talk about the term digital diplomacy, it's basically just a fancy term for like kind of like what we are doing now, conducting diplomacy over, we are not conducting diplomacy, but communication over online media or new, the ICT use of, so use of information and communication technology in diplomacy, right? So that's one of the common factor. And you will see that, and I want to see a raise of hand if possible. How many of you follow at least one or two, or at least one embassies on Facebook or on any social media? Can I get like some sort of response? Like most people, most IR student, I mean, I think you at least follow a couple of embassies from different countries that are in Bangladesh working, right? And if you look at their feed, what are they doing? They are disseminating information about their country and about their activities and other stuff, right? And they are not necessarily, and definitely, they are not talking to the politicians directly. For that, they have meetings. They do that behind the scene, right? But the things that they are doing on social media, who are these for? These are for directly for public to see, right? So they are using these platforms. Just one example, there are many other ways to do this. To do all of this almost. So listening, you can do that via social media. You can, I'm sure if you follow the embassies regularly, you will see they do polls. They will ask questions, ask people to comment on like what they think, different kind of stuff. So they are collecting information from you. What is that? That's listening, right? That's the listening portion of public diplomacy that they are doing. And then let's come to advocacy, right? You will often see that, uh, let's take US Embassy as an example, that they will post something, I don't want to say negative, but against, let's say, some Russian policy or Chinese policy, the one they find threatening, or any other. You will see that they are taking a stand, or they are making a argument either for or against a policy. That's what basically advocacy is. And when they are doing it in social media or digital media, it's easier for them to reach those people, like the general people. And everyone, I mean, you might like that argument, you might not like that, but the goal is that they want to phrase it in a way, they want to present it in a way that you do like it, right? So that's one example of how you do advocacy over like social media as a part of public diplomacy. And I'm going to use social media mostly as an example because it's just easy to understand, but don't like misunderstood that it's only limited to social media. It can be in any other form too. And then there comes the culture. And I think it's self-explanatory that all the time they will be sharing all sorts of like cultural thing that's happening there, right? There will be information about different, what do you call it? Different cultural events and cultural, their culture mainly, and they will also talk about the local culture, but they will promote their culture. And then let's like move on to exchange. Exchange virtually is possible. Like, for example, I know that, I mean, right now at my university, we are hosting some visiting scholars from China, but because of the travel restriction, they are not here in person, but they are doing that over like Zoom and other platforms that we are using. So there are those options that, I mean, people are, what should you call it, like doing. However, there are also this area that, so for example, recently, the Chevening scholarship result was out, and I'm sure you have seen British Council and especially British Embassy posting or sharing the profiles and other stuffs, or all the Chevening scholars and other, showing that exchange, right? So it's not just the exchange itself, but the news about the exchange that also make you interested in that. I think we have covered before, and then international broadcasting becomes tricky, is that all the other four elements that we have talked about, if we think about social media and international broadcasting, by nature, anything you do in social media, it is a kind of international broadcasting, right? If you think about it, because what you are doing, you are sending out a message. Yes, you can set privacy filters, but I'm not talking about that. But in general, for public pages like an embassy page, if you are sending out a message anywhere from the world, anyone with internet access can see that message, right? And if you spend money, you can target audience and make it appear on their feed. And these governments are definitely spending the money to do that, right? So by default, all the messages are kind of a part of international broadcasting. So what happens here is that the borders between these kind of gets blurry, not in the traditional way, like in any other field. We have seen that the digitalization of everything, it has like revolutionized or kind of changed how we do different stuff. And it's especially true for communication. Like this would not be possible without ICT, right? So mm, I think that has brought a huge impact that now you can, and it's not just the embassies, but even an individual with enough follower who have some influence on social media can, uh, in any digital media platform, can actually uh, be a broadcaster for their country and work for their like improving their public diplomacy effort and other stuff. So bringing like this five element in the digital aspect, it's it's it gets a little trickier, and I found that out the hard way because my dissertation was about that. So for my dissertation, I looked at how different foreign embassies use social media, and I mainly focused on Twitter because if I wanted to look at all the social media they use, it's I would not be able to finish my PhD in 3.5 years. It would take me much longer. So I looked at uh, 2 year only, and another reason for that was that in USA, Twitter is still more popular than Facebook, and especially for like official use, Twitter is still uh, most commonly used. And for my this study that I was talking about, I looked at 27 embassies from all over the country. And I selected these 27 embassies based on the soft power ranking. So I'm sure you're familiar with the soft power ranking. So there's this Center for Public Diplomacy. I think they are not, I know they are based in University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. So they do this research with the cooperation of University of either Edinburgh. Yeah, I think it's University of Edinburgh that they do this ranking of soft powers in the world. And they have a detailed methodology. Just look up soft power index. Just if you just Google it, you will find it. And it's from CPT. And they rank the top 30 countries in terms of soft power. So my rationale for going for that 30 countries was that those are the countries that have the most resource in a way to spend in terms of soft power because they are ranking high. So they're definitely doing well. So if I want to look at what are the trends, it would be best to look at who are actually doing it most actively and more proactively. Yeah, doing it better in a way. So I took that list of 30 countries, and I had to get rid of three because of different issues. For example, USA was one of them, and USA does not have an embassy in the USA. So that was obviously had to be gone. And then there were two embassies that did not meet my minimum criteria of how many tweets I wanted from each embassy, because I cannot, if I take 5 tweets from one country and 500 from another, that does not work. You need a balance. Yes, it does not have to be the exact same number, but when you're working with your methodology, it needs to be consistent, right? You need to find a range, you need to define it in your research methodology that what is going to be the criteria for selection. So I ended up with 27 embassies, which I think is a good number to study to find a trend. And then I collected about 20,000 tweets from them, like from those countries, and also all the like responses and replies and the comments and all sorts of metrics that you can do to look at how these countries are like definitely different and how are they doing it. So I'm going to talk a little about the results, but before that, I want to take a quick pause and ask Shabuz, how long do we have? How long should I go? Because I don't want to keep going.
ভাই এটা আপনার উপর নির্ভর করবে, আপনি কখন শেষ করতেছেন। তারপর আমাদের কোশ্চেন সেশন থাকবে, তারপরে আমরা শেষ করব। আপনি রিল্যাক্সে করতে থাকেন।
Okay, so I will not go into the details result, but I will just give you a brief summary of the result, like what I found, and I think that might like draw some questions from you, I'm hoping, because my committee definitely had a lot of questions when I defended my dissertation. But here's the deal, that all the literature suggests that this digitalization that has changed the diplomacy, it should shift from, I mean, theoretically, what it's supposed to do, that's what the theories and the literature suggest, that the diplomacy, especially public diplomacy, is moving from a I want to say not like from one to many to kind of many to many, if that makes sense. So let me get an idea of that. Is that previously this kind of thing was one way, right? Most of this was one way. It was information coming from them. However, with the digitalization, what new came is that we can, let's say someone, one embassy made a post, we can ask questions there, make comments. They might not choose to answer. Sometimes they will not. Most of the times they will not. But there's this chance of a dialogue going on, right? So the argument from the communication theory is that it's going to move from a monologue to a dialogue model. So from a monologic model to a dialogic mode of communication. However, so I had like several research questions. So first of all, I wanted to look at like what is their social media landscape look like, the composition, demographic, all sorts of stuff, who they are actually targeting, what type of content they are publishing, and then what of these 5 categories they are focusing more and how well they are doing in each of those. So there were a lot of details. I'm mainly going to talk about those 5, the result on the 5, and the most strikingly, the broadcasting came on top, not surprising at all. What was surprising is like the volume by which it like came on top, that most of the countries are still basically, even in digital platform where you can have dialogue, but you know that saying that old habit die hard, and diplomacy is an age-old institution. It's not going to change overnight, but it's still what I found is that it's still very much one-sided. There's not a lot of dialogue happening. There are some exceptions, yes, but if we generalize over the 27 countries, it's still in the one-way communication model. The other shocking thing in terms of literature, and Carl makes a very good argument for that, is that the first aspect of diplomacy is listening, because without listening, you will not be able to uh, assess what your position is, what the perception of your country is to the people that you are talking to. And then you, what do you call it? You mm, take actions according to that. Listening was the least commonly found element that the embassies used. Culture came second. Again, culture is it's a very common and easy thing to do. I guess, yeah. So that one, and then advocacy was third, exchange was fourth, and listening was the last. So I am not surprised by the middle three or the fourth, but the finding that um listening was the like least done kind of shows that what the scholars are arguing that this is how you should do is not what people are doing in the field. So there's this huge gap between the academia and how they are suggesting, so the theory and practice, to put it simply. So there's this big gap that still needs to be kind of reconciled. So in my work, I do suggest some ways how embassies and like governments can address those. But I think that's a discussion for another time. And since this is question, counter questions, and perhaps answer, I think I have given more than enough uh, idea about like my work and my interest and public diplomacy in digital age. What I want is to hear questions from you and like what can and how can I potentially help.